How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Dragon's Den, and today we're going to discuss cards that are currently on the Commander ban list that I believe should be unbanned. Now, while I'm recording this is after the Rules Committee has made the announcement that they are returning control of the format over to Wizards of the Coast. So, let's just touch on that really quick. It's something I haven't wanted to speak on until we really start to see the effects that it's going to have and how it's going to play out. So far, it seems as though the community has looked at it as a net negative for the format, that Wizards is going to run the format in a way that benefits profits more than the health of the format. And I just want to say, let's give it time and, see how they handle it. And I also want to say that for the people that were making threats and things like that to members of the Rules Committee over the recent bannings, in no way is that acceptable. I realize that there are some people out there that probably took some heavy financial losses on the cards that they owned. And if that's you, that sucks. But this is a game that we all play, and we know it's possible for cards to get banned. And while that can be very frustrating and upsetting, especially when some of the cards are worth so much money, it does not give you the right to make threats. So, after today's stream, Wizards of the Coast is supposed to stream today and address the Commander format. I will speak more on all of this after that, after we have more information, after we see what's going to happen. So, with that being said, let's go on and get into today's video, which is, I'm going to talk about cards that I think are banned and should be unbanned. And I got this straight off the Rules Committee website, which I realize that's a little bit in a gray area now with the changes that are coming and everything else. But I did it in a way where I could see the Rules Committee's reasonings behind the bannings, along with when the card was banned and everything else. And these are the cards that I think should come off the ban list, so let's get into it. First is Balance. Balance is 1 white and 1 generic for a sorcery. Each player chooses a number of lands he or she controls equal to the number of lands controlled by the player who controls the fewest, then sacrifices the rest. Players discard cards and sacrifice creatures the same way. So basically, the way this card works is when you cast it, by the time it's all said and done, everybody is going to have an equal board. They're all going to have the same number of creatures, same number of lands, same number of cards in hand. So, the Rules Committee said this was banned. I guess it's just always been banned because it just has a little dash there. It says, on its face, Balance looks like a very effective catch-up strategy that's mechanically very white, but in practice it leads to slow, long games with a low density of meaningful decisions or memorable events. Players are often left with little to no resources and little to no cards in hand, feeling like they don't have any agency in the game they're playing. So, I guess what they're saying is the biggest issue is it's going to slow down the game. My argument against this is that cards that slow down the game are staples of the format with board wipes. Board wipes also slow down the game. So, I don't necessarily agree that this slows down the game too much, and that's my opinion. So, yes, if somebody top decks Balance and it's the only card they have in hand and they cast it, everybody's going to discard their hands, essentially. However, I don't think it'll hit your, and even if they have no creatures and they cast this, alright, now everybody's just top decking, but everybody's still going to have lands. And it does slow the game down but I don't know that it necessarily slows it down more than a board wipe or even something like an Armageddon, destroying all lands and things like that, So, and I feel like in most cases, this could be used as a way to kind of keep one player from running away with it. If you have somebody playing a deck and they're just absolutely running away with it and they got a bunch of creatures and they've ramped out a bunch of land and everything else, this can really be a, hey, come back down to earth kind of card. So, while it may slow the game down some, I don't think it slows it down any more than other cards that are legal that slow things down. So, it's definitely something that I would see unbanned. Next, Coalition Victory. Coalition Victory costs Wooburg and 3. It's a sorcery. You win the game if you control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. So, I think there are enough ways to stop this that it's not something we would necessarily have to worry about too much. So, the reason I say that is over the years, removal has gotten better and better and better. So, number one, for this card to even be at its most effective, number one, it has to be in a 5-color deck. And you have to control a land of each basic land type. The easiest way to do that is going to be with shocks and triumphs. Yes, you can do it with basics, but it's going to be a lot harder to get 5 basics out. So any deck that plays this is going to be playing fetches and shocks and triumphs to get it off consistently. Then because your commander is 5-color, you always got the 5-color creature ready to go. So while it can be very good with removal and counter magic being better now than it was over the years, if somebody goes to cast Coalition Victory, if you can't counter the spell, chances are somebody at the table is going to have some sort of instant speed removal to remove their 5-color creature. And I know you can technically do this with one creature of each color or anything, but just if you can find any way to stop it, the spell just fizzles and you don't have to worry about it again. And with it costing 8 mana, especially with them getting rid of some of the fast mana out of the format, everybody's going to kind of have time to prepare and be ready for it. So I don't think Coalition Victory would be a huge kind of problem, especially like at casual tables. And I feel like it has it's good in really, really, really low tier casual tables, like maybe people that are playing with precons and you happen to be the person who doesn't have a precon or whatever. So, but other than that, I think if you get this in a normal casual game or in a high level tier game, it's not going to be that good. So I definitely think it should be unbanned. Next is Gifts Ungiven. Gifts Ungiven is 1 blue, 3 generic for an instant. Search your library for up to 4 cards with different names and reveal them. Target opponent chooses 2 of those cards, put the chosen cards into your graveyard, and the rest into your hand, then shuffle. So, the Rules Committee reasoning for banning this, and it was banned in 2009, Gifts' low blue investment makes it splashable, and the instant speed means you can use it at the most opportune time with lowered chance for countering or interaction, the ability to tutor for 2 combo pieces, and 2 ways to recur them generally makes this a 1-card game ender, and even in the most casual play is a double tutor. So, here is my issue with that reasoning. In 2009, this might have been a really good card. I can't be 100% sure on that, as it was quite a few years after that I started playing Commander. But just by today's standards, it doesn't seem that strong. So, you have all of your 1-mana tutors, which are perfectly fine. Things like Demonic Tutor. And tutoring is becoming an easier strategy. It's becoming more consistent. New tutors are being printed all the time. Tutors have always been super good. So their thing is, like, you go get 2 combo pieces and 2 ways to recur it. Well, the reason I don't think that's necessarily the greatest is, like, number one, your deck has to be built to do that. So I can see this being in, like, a Muldrotha kind of deck, because they say with it having 1 blue, it's very splashable. If your commander has blue in it, you're not just splashing blue. Like, you're playing blue. So I don't think the whole 1 blue mana thing making it splashable has anything to do with anything. So yeah, like, maybe in Muldrotha, it's good. Because you can go get, chances are you'll have more ways to recur something in that. Or if you're doing some sort of, like, is it artifact, graveyard kind of thing or something, Like, there are times where that's going to be good, but I think in most cases, like they said, worst case or best case, it's a double tutor. Okay, well, the thing is, somebody's going to look at it. They're going to be able to look at the board, know which best things to throw away, which best things to let you have. So I don't necessarily see that being a problem. And then, even if you cast this on your opponent's end step before your turn, people are going to know what's coming. So if anybody has mana untapped, they're going to hold their removal for what they know you have and everything else. So really the only, like, the best opportune time to play this where it could potentially be really, really strong is if you cast it on your opponent's end step right before your turn, and then you're able to untap and do whatever it is you want to do. But chances are, if you're a combo deck and you're looking to tutor for your combo pieces rather than just have a bunch of different combos in your deck, you're going to be playing the other tutors anyway. So what does I don't see it as being any stronger than anything we necessarily have at the moment. So this is something I would definitely unban. Next is Library of Alexandria. It's a land. Tap to add 1 colorless to your mana pool or draw a card from your library. You may use the card drawing ability only if you have exactly 7 cards in your hand. So looks as though it's always been banned. It says their reasoning was, library was for a long time considered the 10th piece of power in vintage play. Like those, it was banned to avoid the perceived barrier to entry, but was strong enough to be a candidate for banning even without the optics, especially in long games where the card draw yields inevitability over time, combined with its colorless nature, allowing it to go in every deck, and the occasional difficulty for inexperienced players to realize that library is the reason they're losing. It's, I can't see that. Okay, so its place on the list is very secure. So, I don't necessarily see this as being an extremely powerful card. Card draw has gotten better over the years. This was obviously one of the cards that was banned going into Commander, so it's never even got the chance to see it. But card draw has gotten better over the years, along with interaction, along with everything else. The fact that you have to have exactly 7 cards in hand does sort of, I think that's enough of a drawback, because that's something you would have to consciously think about to get the draw effect. And I think, like, if this is in your opening hand, you draw your card, play it as your land for turn, you can tap it and draw a card, and that gives you some card advantage in the beginning of the game. But you get into the later part of the game where you're going to be casting more spells and doing things like that. I don't think, it's a land that'll draw you a couple of cards, and I don't think the fact that it can go in every deck means that it will go in every deck, because I don't personally like playing colorless lands that just tap for colorless and anything that's 3 colors or more. That's just me, and I think it's actively a detriment going into 4 or 5 color decks. So I don't think it'll see play in every single deck, and I don't think that people will be able to consistently maintain the 7 cards in hand. to constantly get the extra card draw off of it. So it's not something that I think is insanely overpowered, and I would definitely unban this card. Next is Lutri the Spell Chaser. I'm only going to slightly touch on Lutri. Lutri's it's a companion, it's an otter, it has flash, and it's a fork effect. You copy an instant or sorcery. It never even got the chance to be in the format. So the reasoning behind it is the companion mechanic makes it where you have to have a unique deck building to be able to run something as your companion. However, all commander decks, well, I'm not going to say all because there are a few exceptions, already meet that deck building requirement to where this just sort of can automatically be your companion. So they said it basically makes it where every single deck that fits these colors basically has a 101st card. That seems strong. It really does. I think in the vast majority of cases that paying 3 to copy an instant or sorcery isn't something that every deck that this has is going to do. But then they changed the companion mechanic. So Lutri and all companions now that are in the companion zone you have to pay 3 mana to put it into your hand. And then and in this case, you have to pay 3 more to actually cast the spell. So Lutri is a 6 mana investment to get a 3/2 body and at best copy an instant or sorcery. So I think Lutri should have been given a chance, especially after the companion change, because once you pay the 3 to put it into your hand, people are going to know it's there, people are going to know it's coming, people are going to be able to prepare for Lutri. And its effect is good, copying an instant or sorcery is good. It's not overpowered. Lutri should have been given a chance. And the fact that this card was pre-banned is one of the bannings that, made me the most angry. Because I really liked Lutri, and I felt like I never got the opportunity to actually use this card. And now that there's a bunch more otters because of Bloomburrow, I definitely think that now would be the time to unban Lutri and give him a chance in Commander. Alright, next card. Prophet of Kruphix. Some people might think I'm crazy for this. Mostly old school Commander players. And I don't blame you because it is a good card, but I don't think it is the, bee's knees. Anyway, costs 1 blue, 1 green, 3 generic for 2/3. Untap all creatures and lands you control. During each other player's untap step, you may cast creature cards as though they had a flash. It was banned in 2016. Prophet of Kruphix creates a gameplay pattern where the controller of the card can interact and meaningfully play during each other player's turns. This inevitability leads to one player monopolizing playtime without definitively ending the game. So, basically they're saying that with Prophet of Kruphix out, one player is doing too much. So, basically, if I play Prophet of Kruphix, I'm going to untap all my creatures and lands on their turn, and their turn, and their turn, and then back to me. My argument against this is, yes, creatures have flash. So if I have something like a Guardian Project or a Great Henge or something like that out, and I'm untapping and I'm dropping creatures and drawing cards on my opponent's turns, and then I'm doing that every turn, that is really, really, really strong. My biggest argument against this is that there are still ways to achieve this effect. Between Leyline of Anticipation, Vidalcan Orrery, Seedborn Muse, Wilderness Reclamation, things like that, you can piece Prophet of Kruphix together. And you're like, oh, well, it's it's multiple pieces instead of all just on one card. My argument is, if I have Wilderness Reclamation and Leyline of Anticipation out, Those are enchantments, which are harder to interact with than creatures. And on top of that, it's only a 2-card setup. It's not like it's hard to get a 2-card setup going. So the fact that this is on a creature, it's stapled onto a creature, I think makes it better now. Because, like I said, creature removal in general, gets better year over year. Interaction gets better year over year. When this thing hits the table, somebody is bound to have an answer to it. At some point, somebody is bound to have an answer to it. And if you're at a regular 4-player pod and somebody drops Prophet of Crucifix and none of you have an answer, that's really, statistically, that's super unlikely, and it's just very, very unlucky for that to happen. So, Prophet of Crucifix is good because it's stapled onto a creature. I don't think it's extremely overpowered. The fact that it only gives your creature spells flash and doesn't allow you to do everything at instant speed, again, I think it's well enough balanced in today's Commander to be unbanned. Next, Recurring Nightmare. Recurring Nightmare is 1 black, 2 generic for an enchantment. Sacrifice a creature, return Recurring Nightmare to owner's hand. Put target creature card from your graveyard into play. Play this ability as a sorcery. So this can only be done at sorcery speed, which is important. So it was banned in 2008. Outside of counter magic, it's nearly impossible to stop this card from doing its thing once it gets going, because returning it to its owner's hand is part of the cost of activating its ability. If your graveyard is sufficiently stocked, it's entirely possible that once you draw Recurring Nightmare, it is the only spell you'll want to play for the rest of the game. So, I can see where it could be really good. So, they're right that outside of counter magic, this is sort of hard to interact with. Completely understandable, because its ability, returning it to hand is part of the ability. So when an opponent ends their turn, they're just going to make sure that, I got a yawn. They're just going to make sure that at the end of their turn, they do its ability one last time to put it into their hand. That way, you can't interact with it on your turns, and they'll just go back to doing it again on their turn. I completely understand why that's strong. The reason I would unban it is counter magic is better now than it's ever been. So it's going to be easier. It's going to be easier for somebody to counter this to begin with. Number one, so that's my first thing. So if somebody comes out of nowhere and they've got it, they've got it. But once they have it in hand and they have it, to hold a counter spell up for it. So that's the first thing. Number two, graveyard hate is more and more common than it's ever been before. Graveyard hate is something that everybody should be running in just about every deck. Some decks don't have the room for it, but most of them do have at least some piece of graveyard hate, so that you can interact with it if they decide to stock their graveyard big or something like that. One Tormod's Crypt later, and it's gone. So, with graveyard interaction getting better and better, and counter magic getting better and better, this is something that I think is worthy of being unbanned. Next is Sundering Titan. Sundering Titan is an 8 mana, 7/10. When Sundering Titan enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, choose a land of each basic land type, then destroy those lands. I absolutely 1,000,000% see how this is strong, and land destruction is extremely annoying. So, here's why I would unban it. Firstly, because Armageddon's unbanned. And yeah, that's kind of my big argument there, is Armageddon's unbanned. It costs half the mana and destroys all lands instead of just 5 at a time. The reason I think Sundering Titan, it was banned in 2012. There are many lands that players would love to see leaving the battlefield, but Sundering Titan doesn't target those. Decks that blink or bounce Sundering Titan can utilize its effect repeatedly, leading to an environment where it's nearly impossible for opponents to keep basic lands in play. Basic land destruction is a predictably unpopular mechanic, especially in an environment where you don't know the people you're playing against. Yes, land destruction, annoying, but here's my argument against it. Like I said, I brought up Armageddon. If you're going to say we're going to ban Sundering Titan because land destruction is annoying, then ban all land destruction cards. Ban that out of the format. But if you think it's worth keeping in some of these cards, then Sundering Titan should also be allowed. And Sundering Titan notably says, when it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, choose a land of each basic land type, then destroy those lands. It doesn't say may. So yes, you can flicker it, you can repeat its effect and things like that to kind of hurt your opponents and keep them held back and everything else. My arguments against it are, number one, kill it while you've still got lands, destroy it, exile it, get it out of the way. There's also several more effects now that just shut down enter the battlefield effects entirely. Lots more cards that give your stuff indestructible protection. It's easier to protect against Sundering Titan. But then also, if somebody's not careful, you can overdo Sundering Titan's effects and then you'll have to start destroying your own lands because that's not a May ability. So while it can be abused, it's not something that is just absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I think that Sundering Titan should be unbanned just because it's easier to get rid of and easier to defend against than it was in 2012. Next is Sway of the Stars. It's 2 blue and 8 generic. Each player shuffles his or her hand, graveyard, and permanents he or she owns into his or her library, then draws 7 cards. Each player's life total becomes 7. It says casting Sway of the Stars has the effect of completely negating the game that was in process before its resolution. Sway adds time to the game and takes away action. You might as well shuffle up and play a new game. In a sense, that is what this is doing. This is saying shuffle up, play a new game, but everybody starts at 7 life. So I can see where they're coming from. Like you play Sway of Stars, and it's like, okay, if we're going to have to shuffle up and completely reset everything we just did, let's just restart a new game at 40 life. I can understand that argument, but at the same time, I don't think that is enough of an argument to say that this needs to be banned. So if somebody plays Sway of Stars and they put back everybody else at 7, they're basically saying, hey, I think my deck can do 7 damage faster than your deck can. And it becomes a race. You know, and this could be one of those cards where if somebody's having an absolutely terrible game, they're just having bad luck, everything else, like just nothing's going their way. If they can resolve Sway of the Stars, they can sort of give it a soft reset and still be in the same game because they would have had to have survived in the last game long enough to be able to cast Sway of the Stars, which costs 10 mana, by the way. Like, it's not a cheap investment. So, while I can see where some people would think it was absolutely annoying and unnecessary to not just shuffle up and play another game, I definitely also see the value of Sway of the Stars. Next is Sylvan Primordial, 7 mana, 2 green, 5 generic, 6/8 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, destroy target non-creature permanent that player controls. For each permanent destroyed this way, search your library for a force card, put that card onto the battlefield tab, then shuffle. This is something, again, so you're going to be destroying non-creature permanents. So you can hit your opponent's lands if you want to, but I don't think that's how most people play it. You can hit artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers. It'll blow up. It'll blow up some things and then get you some forests. So you set your opponents back a little bit and you ramp a little bit. So I don't necessarily see that as a problem. Obviously, flickering it, you can kind of set your opponent's way back while ramping yourself way out. I mean, I get how that's good. I definitely see that as strong, but again, I'll argue that this is 7 mana and it's harder to interact with than it used to be when it was banned in 2014. So it's definitely something I think that we should bring back and give another chance in the format. Next is Tolarian Academy. So Sarah Sanctum is unbanned. I've had a Sarah Sanctum. I kind of regret that I ever traded that away. I didn't know it was on the reserve list at the time, but that's a story for another time. I see how Tolarian Academy is good. Obviously, with artifact lands and low-cost artifacts and things like that, this thing can produce a crazy amount of mana extremely fast, but it's also the only one that's banned out of the cycle, with Sarah Sanctum and Gaia's Cradle both still being legal. So I guess my argument is either ban all three of them or don't ban any of them at all, especially since some of the fast mana rocks just got banned out of the format. Tolarian Academy is something that I definitely think could be very, very strong, but would be okay in today's format. And our last card, Upheaval. 2 blue, 4 generic sorcery, return all permanents to their owner's hands. So, it's pretty simple. It's return all permanents to every player's hand. Their lands, their permanents, everything. And then you just pick up where you left off. This could be really good if you float all your mana, cast it, and then you can already get some of your stuff back out. I get how that's really strong, but at that point, everybody's having to rebuild, and if you're somebody who's way behind and you cast this, then, you're kind of just trying to catch up, maybe get back into the game. If you're somebody who was already way ahead and you cast this, well, then you're just wrong, because if you're already way ahead in the game, you have no reason to cast Upheaval. So it's only going to help the guy that's in last if they cast it, or maybe if you're somewhere in the middle, kind of reset the board and everything else. If somebody's getting way ahead, it'll slow the game down, but I don't think it'll slow it down much more than any other board wipe, other than the fact that everybody's going to have to start replaying their lands. So in that sense, it definitely slows the game down by a few turns, because people are going to spend the next few turns rebuilding. But there are several board wipes that are still in the format that do that, and the stuff goes to your graveyard. So such as like Armageddon destroying all your lands, or things that blow up all non-land permanents and whatnot. Those will set you back so far. So I definitely don't see Upheaval as too much of a problem. But that's all the cards that are currently on the Commander ban list that I would, without a doubt, ban off the ban list. Or take off the ban list, excuse me. Maybe with Wizards of the Coast taking over the Commander format, I would hope to see some unbannings. I'd say, generally speaking, I am pretty against bans in Commander. So, if we have to have a ban list, these are cards that I would currently take off of it. But if it were up to me, since Commander is a casual format, a multiplayer format, I would have no bans in Commander, personally. So, with that being said, these were all my opinions and everything else. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you think down below. I'm really interested to hear what y'all think about this, and what you think about all the changes going on in the Commander format right now. And I'll see you next time. Y'all have a good one.